guys, so today's video is going to be a little different from the other videos that I've done, and I've been wanting to do a video like this for a long time because I'm really interested in this kind of topic. But if you can tell by the title of this video, this is going to be a true crime video. In past videos I've mentioned that I love true crime, and so this particular topic of true crime I wanted to do because one, you really don't see it talked about online, and two, this kind of hits home for me. So the true crime story that we are going to talk about today is the largest mass lynching in US history, and this actually was lynching of Italian Americans in New Orleans. And if you guys didn't know, I am Italian, and these Italians that were murdered specifically were Sicilian, which I am also Sicilian. It really hits home for me. This is part of the history of my people and you don't see it talked about, so I wanted to kind of put it out there and share this story and kind of share the hardships that Italians have gone through here in the US. And so I have my notes right here, so if I'm looking down, that's what I'm looking at. Anyway, let's just get right into it. So the lynching actually took place on March 14th, 1891 in New Orleans, Louisiana. Basically, 11 Italian Americans were murdered because they were suspected, they were allegedly played a role in the murder of police chief David Hennessy. Because of this incident, there were a lot of prejudice happened towards Italian Americans. Basically, Italy almost went to war with America because of this. So let's get into the kind of background of this story. In late 19th century America, there was a lot of prejudice against Italian Americans, specifically Southern Italians. For forever, Southern Italians were seen as lesser than Northern Italians. I say we because I'm 100% Italian and I'm 100% Southern Italian. So if I say we, it's because that's what I am. But basically we were looked upon as like scum of the earth. We were poor, lesser than, you know, the noble Northern Italians, and it's still a little bit like that today. I have noticed when I went to Northern Italy, there, you know, were some kind of comments, or you can tell that the North does still kind of see themselves as higher than the South, and especially with Sicily. My own grandmother has even told me, you're Italian and you're Sicilian. Brief history of Sicily. It was conquered by a ton of other countries before it became part of Italy. Italians always kind of saw it and sometimes still see it today as lesser than mainland Italy. So that's just a little history. But what I'm trying to say here is Southern Italians were always seen as lowest on the totem pole. Even in America, there was prejudice against them, and they immigrated here. A lot of them were looked at for hard labor because of the end of slavery. They were used to take those jobs that African Americans were not in anymore. They came here for cheap labor, basically. And then in the 1890s, thousands of Italians came to New Orleans, and especially Sicilians. The French Quarter was actually called Little Sicily, which I found really interesting because, you know, here I live in the New York City area. There's a big Italian population here, and when my grandparents immigrated to America, this is where they came. I found it really interesting that there were other parts of the US that Italians immigrated to, and I did not know that New Orleans had a really big Italian, more specifically Sicilian population. So because of this, there was a lot of anti-Italian prejudice, and they were kind of complaining that the city became attracted to these lowlives. There was a quote actually that I found that said, the worst classes of Europe, Southern Italians and Sicilians, the most idle, vicious, and worthless people among us. And they claimed that they were filthy and, you know, blame them for spread of diseases. That's a background of what we're going to be talking about. Next, we're going to talk about the entire murder of the police chief David Hennessy. So on the evening of October 15th, 1890, the New Orleans police chief, David Hennessy, was shot by several gunmen as he was walking home from work. So he ended up returning fire and he tried to chase down his attackers before collapsing. So then after he was shot, he reportedly whispered to a captain, William O'Connor, that the Dagos shot him. And Dagos was a derogatory name that people called Italians and other people of Mediterranean descent. This was alleged, so no one knows if this is true, and this will come into play a little bit later. But basically after that, he was in the hospital for several hours after the shooting, and then he passed away of complications. While he was in the hospital, he supposedly spoke to friends, could not name the shooters, could not describe them or anything. He allegedly claimed they were Italian, but then the next day he died, like I said, of complication. After he passed away, there was a mass arrest of Italians. The mayor, Joseph Shakespeare, told police to scour all the neighborhoods and find Italians and just basically arrest every single Italian they came into contact with. And so within 24 hours, 45 people have been arrested. As many as 250 Italians were rounded up, and most were obviously let go because of lack of evidence, and even to the point where local Italians were afraid to leave their homes and even go to work. So in the end, 19 men were ultimately charged with the murder or as accessories to the murder, and they were held without bail in the prison. A few days after Hennessy's death, the mayor gave a speech saying that Hennessy had been the victim of Sicilian vengeance, and he called upon all the citizens of the town to teach all of these Sicilians a lesson. And then he ended up appointing a committee of about 50 people to investigate this whole crime and to basically kind of look out for the mafia and any Italians that would have killed Hennessy. So on October 23rd, the committee ended up publishing an open letter to Italian Americans and to the Italian community of New Orleans. They basically encouraged them to kind of turn on each other and turn in any information on the people that they knew. So they were trying to turn the Italian community against each other and trying to get them to give them information because they were so set on this was an Italian that committed this crime. This committee of 50 people ended up hiring 2 private detectives to pose as prisoners in the jail to try and get the people who were arrested to kind of turn on each other and get more information about them and just talk about the murder. And then apparently the detectives didn't get any information or didn't get any useful information towards the case. These detectives were not asked to testify at the trial. They just kind of found that one of the people that they arrested claimed to be mentally ill. Meanwhile, while all this is going on, the defendants were subject to very negative political publicity and across the entire country, because this got national headlines, but across the entire country, the news headlines were always something like, you know, Mafia New Orleans, or, you know, the Dagos are criminals, like all that kind of negative publicity. So everyone was turning against the Italian community. So at the scene of the crime, there were several shotguns found, and one supposedly was a muzzle loading shotgun, which was a type that was widely used in the New Orleans. A lot of people in the New Orleans area use this, and especially like people throughout the South supposedly use this type of gun. And police claimed that it was a favorite of Italians, even though everyone in the South used this type of gun. So again, they were turning evidence directing towards, you know, Italians, and the people believed it because they were very discriminatory against Italians. Basically, they did a lot of that throughout this entire case. So now we're going to focus on the actual murder trial. Trial of the 9 suspects began on February 16th, 1891, and it ended on March 13th, 1981. So it took a little less than a month for this trial, and the jury selection was a very long process. A lot of prospective jurors had to be rejected before finding those 12 that would actually work in the trial, who were not prejudiced, who didn't know the case, the whole thing. Like I mentioned before, a lot of the evidence that was used for this trial was weak or very contradictory. There was not a lot of evidence leaning towards the Italians as the murderers, towards Hennessy. The murder took place on a poorly lit street on a damp night in a very corrupt area of the city, so it could have been anyone. The only reason they were going towards Italians because Hennessy supposedly said that it was Italians that shot him, even though he didn't see it. Another one was an eyewitness. The eyewitness testimony was unreliable. So the guy that he spoke to and said it was the Italians, he was, one, not on, like, he didn't speak at the trial, and two, it was just unreliable. Along with that, there were other discrepancies and just things that did not match up. So in the end, 2 of the men were found not guilty by direct verdict, and no evidence had been presented against them. 4 of the defendants were again not guilty, and the jury declared a mistrial on the other 3 because they just couldn't come together and find a verdict against them. They couldn't agree on anything. And the 6 men who were acquitted were not released, but they were held pending an additional charge of lying in wait with intent to commit murder. All 9 men were returned to the prison. Basically, now we're going to talk about the lynching or the murder. So a group of about 150 people, they called themselves the Committee on Safety, and they met to kind of plan this murder of these criminals. So they formed a mob, and this was a multiracial mob. So the Italian consul that was in New Orleans did try and stop them. They sought out the help of the governor, but of course the governor could not be reached. They marched to the prison shouting, "We want the Dagos." And then inside the prison, as the mob was approaching them, a prison warden, he let all 19 Italian prisoners out of their cell and told them to hide. So then out of the mob, a small execution squad went about with the killings, and it was led by city leaders. A lot of basically important people in the city of New Orleans made up this mob and execution squad. So just some of the things that happened were that the man who was accused of being mentally ill, he was hauled outside, hung from a lamppost and shot. Another man was hung from a tree and shot. 9 others were shot or clubbed to death inside of the prison, and some of the bodies were left hanging dead for hours. So I did want to read, I have a list of each of the victims. Not everyone was killed. A lot of people were able to hide. So Antonio Bagneto, who was a fruit peddler, he was tried and acquitted, and these were the people that were lynched and were killed. James Caruso, he was not tried. Loreto Comites, he was a tinsman. He was not tried. Rocco Geraci, he was not tried. Joseph P. Maquecha, he was a fruit importer. He was tried and he was acquitted. Antonio Marchesi was a fruit peddler and was tried and acquitted. Pietro Monasterio, he was a cobbler and he was supposed to be in a mistrial. Emanuele Polizzi, he was a street vendor. Again, he was supposed to have a mistrial. Frank Romero, he was a ward politician. He was not tried. Antonio Scafidi, he was a fruit peddler and he was supposed to have a mistrial. Charles Trenia, he was a rice plantation laborer and he was not tried. And these were the people who were able to escape the lynching. They all hid inside the prison. John Caruso, he was not tried. Bastien Incardona, he was a laborer. He was tried and acquitted. Gaspare Marchesi, he was 14 years old and he was the son of Antonio Marchesi, who was murdered. He was tried and acquitted. Peter Natali, he was a laborer. He was not tried. Charles Piezzo, he was a grocer. He was not tried. Charles Patorno, he was a merchant. He was not tried. And Salvatore Sinceri, he was not tried. So after the lynching, the court and district attorney set the survivors free, and they dropped the charges against the men who had not been tried. So all of these lynched men minus 1 were Sicilians, and 1 was a Louisiana native of Sicilian descent, and 1 came from Rome. So basically most of these men were Sicilian or of Sicilian descent. So the aftermath of this lynching, a lot of newspapers throughout the country were sympathetic to the lynchers. So the victims were presumed to have been involved with the mafia, which still actually happens today. People just, assume that all Italians, or more specifically Sicilians, are involved in the mafia. I have even been asked if my family is in the mafia. So that still happens today, I will say, but especially at this time in history. A lot of these newspapers blamed the victims, and they were just very like, good thing that they were killed. They must have did it. They're probably in the mafia. So the Italian community and the Italian government did did protest against these lynchings, and that's when the media kind of decided to shift a little bit and they became less supportive of the murderers, of the lynchers. A grand jury ended up coming together to investigate this lynching. The judge, Robert H. Marr, happened to be a very good friend of several of the people in this lynch mob, so already not good. And then on May 5th, 1891, the grand jury ended up concluding that several of the jurors on the Hennessy case had been bribed to acquit the Italians. No proof was offered and no criminal charges were pursued. So the grand jury also claimed that it could not identify participants in the lynching, and the lynching was described as a gathering. Several thousand of the first, best, and even most law-abiding of citizens in this city. No one was indicted. So basically, no one who murdered these innocent people were acquitted, charged, nothing happened, they got off free. So there were some political repercussions that happened after this lynching. The ties between Italy and the USA were very, very strained. There were rumors of war. The Italian government was very upset with this and the outcome of this whole trial. The Italian consul did actually leave New Orleans in May, so a little bit after the trial. The New York Times did publish his statement accusing the city of being responsible for the lynching. So he accused all of New Orleans for the lynchings of these men, and the Italian government actually demanded that the lynch mob take responsibility for their actions and for the murder, which obviously did not happen. They did want justice for these men and their families. They wanted the American government to, pay and basically admit that these men were murdered. And then when the US declined all of that, Italy did recall its ambassador from the US, from Washington, D.C. As a protest. So they did protest, and the US did follow a suit, recalling its legislation from Rome. And there, like I said, there were rumors that Italy wanted to go to war with the US. So they were this close to going to war over this. So this was very serious, and people did not take this very lightly. This was a big event that happened in US history in the late 1800s. And because of this, the president at the time, Benjamin Harrison, this was when the entire start of Columbus Day happened. In 1892, that was the first celebration of Columbus Day, and it commemorated the 400th anniversary of when Columbus landed in the New World. And I know that is a whole separate topic, and a lot of people have various opinions on Columbus Day, but in the end, Columbus Day was started because of this, lynching and the serious events that followed it. So that's why there is a Columbus Day. Lots of different ideas about Columbus Day, which we're not going to talk about. This is not the video. And then also in the end, the US paid $2,211.90, which I don't know what it is in today's money, to each family of each victim. Like I have mentioned, this incident, this event has been forgotten in American history. A lot of people don't know about this. I, for one, as an Italian American, did not know about this. I was not taught this in school. I discovered this, pretty recently, within recent years, because of, certain Italian podcasts that I listen to and channels that I follow here on YouTube. This is not known and not brought to light here in America. Supposedly it is known more in Italy. I'm not 100%, I can't speak to that. I've never asked my family who lives there if they know about this, if they were taught about this in school. But I can say for here in America, as an Italian American, I was not taught basically any history on my people and the people that came here, which is a reason why I wanted to make this video. I wanted to kind of put this on the internet, and if you're an Italian American watching this, or if you're an Italian, I wanted to kind of spread awareness of this event that happened in our history, and because this kind of makes us who we are today. And yeah, so I love true crime, and I wanted to make this true crime video because I've always wanted to do it, and I thought, what better case to showcase in my first true crime video than this case, of my people. Yeah, I just really wanted to do this. So if you are an Italian American, but most importantly, if you are anyone watching this who likes true crime or just who wants to learn something, please give this video a big thumbs up. I hope you enjoyed it. I also do kind of want to start making some more Italian American types of videos, so please leave a comment down below if you would like to see that and what you would like to see. Yeah, I want to, being Italian is a big part of me and a big part of my life and upbringing, so I really want to kind of include that in this channel and, you know, bring that out more, bring that side of me out more. So I really hope you guys would like to see that, and again, leave a comment down below if that's something you want to see and what you would want to see, if you're interested in my culture. So if you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button for more videos. Like I've said a bunch of times, this isn't my usual type of video, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. I just wanted to experiment a little bit, and yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching.